You want a war? You're gonna get one.
Now get the guns, the drugs from my generation. I'll take the fall, the saints, the confirmation. And it's a sex, the gods, the fakes, the fraud, they're messing with me. Come on, come on, come on, let's get it out. Move to the music, play that fucking music. Live through my music, yeah.
Welcome back to Reliving the War, and welcome to the 27th of July 1998. Raw's coming from Anaheim, California tonight, while Nitro's live from San Antonio, Texas. A few things before we get started today. The Fully Loaded review is currently on the channel, and you'll want to check that video out to understand what's happening on Raw tonight. If the video gets pulled, I'll do all I can to get it back online. Secondly, I've started a new Reliving the War channel, and you'll find the link to that channel in this video description. The new channel features highlights from the whole Reliving the War series, and it's also going to serve as my main backup channel. It'll be handy to keep in touch with you guys just in case the main channel gets nuked, so I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to that new channel. Thank you very, very much. Lastly, WCW decided to replay the whole Karl Malone and DDP versus Dennis Rodman and Hollywood Hogan match from Bash at the Beach on this week's episode of Nitro. It was the longest match on the whole telecast, so everything else on Nitro was kinda short. I've removed that tag match from this week's Reliving the War, but it also means the timing's a bit messed up in terms of long Raw matches going up against short Nitro matches. There was nothing else I could do, really. It's an interesting strategy from WCW, but it's not one that benefits this series. Tony Schiavone tells us that DDP's demanded a match against Hollywood Hogan tonight. Goldberg's going to speak for the very first time since winning the belt, and Goldberg's also got a match against Bryan Adams on tonight's program. NWO Hollywood make their way to the ring without Hulk Hogan. Hogan's going to appear on NWO later with Eric Bischoff in just a few moments. Scott Hall says Nitro in the Alamo Dome is just too sweet, but someone who isn't too sweet is big sexy Kevin Nash, or medium-sized sexy Kevin Nash, seeing as the Giant's the real big man around these neck of the woods. Scott issues a challenge, an NWO Hollywood versus NWO Wolfpack Battle Royal at Road Wild. The last man standing wins for his respective faction, and I think this sounds good to be honest. Hall says he and the Giant have the tag belts, Bret Hart has the US title. There's something missing though, and that's the world title, a title that Bryan Adams could win tonight. Yeah, okay. Adams says he was in Japan when he heard about Goldberg beating Hogan by fluke, so Adams jumped on a plane and he begged Hogan to give him a shot at Billy Boy because, you know, Hogan wields such extraordinary powers in WCW. Bryan says he's gonna bring the belt back to the NWO tonight on Nitro, and I'll bet my house that he doesn't. Raven cuts a promo where he says he was hated, despised, and attacked in school for being different, and nothing's changed. He's still hated, he's still despised, and he still gets attacked by high school kids when he gets the bus home from work. Perry Saturn rushes down to the ring wearing something, and Perry says he's sick of hearing Raven cry. He was a rich, spoiled brat as a kid who got it easy, so Perry's gonna give Raven something to cry about right now. He's gonna hand him a Best of Glacier VHS that he compiled all by himself. Canyon shows up, Saturn hits him with a Death Valley driver, Raven gets scooped up by Saturn, but Canyon hits Perry with a flatliner, allowing Raven to walk away after his two main rivals got done taking each other out. We then got a Barbarian versus Jim Duggan match that doesn't sound like much on paper, but the crowd did enjoy it. Jimmy Hart tries to help out Barbarian, but the plan backfires. Duggan wins and Hugh Morris comes out to attack Hacksaw. Here comes the man called Ming to even the odds, but the Minger has no interest in forming a deadly alliance with Hacksaw Jim Duggan. This could have been the dream team for sure. NWO later with Eric Bischoff's up next, and clearly Bischoff's trying to get heat with his bad jokes, but it's the kind of heat that makes fans want to get up and leave for 10 minutes. You know, go out for a smoke and get yourself a hot dog because Bischoff's dragging the show down and we're only 20 minutes into Nitro. Bischoff continues to rip into Jay Leno and Jay's massive chin. Leno had made fun of Hogan on The Tonight Show, so it looks like WCW are going to bring in another celebrity and try to pop a rating. Or, heaven forbid, big pay-per-view numbers. We go to commercial break, and when we come back, Bischoff's sitting at his desk and the crowd aren't even booing anymore. They're talking amongst themselves and not reacting to what's going on. The bit had absolutely died, and it only gets saved when Hollywood Hogan joins Bischoff on set. Imagine Hulk Hogan saving your bit in 1998. Hogan addresses Jay Leno. Jam Master Jay stepped way over the line on his talk show. Hogan says Leno's gonna be in Sturgis. My God. And Hulk sends Leno a final warning. Back off and stop being an asshole. By the way, for those who follow along and watch these shows on WWE Network, all footage from The Tonight Show has been completely removed by WWE, making things very confusing, seeing as Hogan and Bischoff address things that went down on Leno's show. DDP comes out to cut a promo and he says Hulk Hogan sucks. He's scum. Hogan may have hurt DDP last week, but Page is still standing, so that confirms it was Hulk who attacked DDP backstage and not Bret Hart. Dallas gets so angry that he can't talk for a moment. He gets it together and he says he's got one thing on his mind: ridding the world of the self-professed god of professional wrestling. Tonight, Hollywood Hogan will feel DDP's wrath.
And you will, at some point, feel the
Scott Hall, Scott Norton and Dusty Rhodes take over the commentary desk, and seeing as Nash wants none of the bad guy inside the ring, Scott challenges Sting to a match tonight on Nitro. Dusty Rhodes serves Larry Zbyszko with a Texas gag order because he keeps ripping into the NWO on commentary. Larry's told he's not allowed to bother the NWO anymore or there will be consequences. Scott Norton takes on Jim Neidhart next and the match is over in about 10 seconds. The powerbomb Norton pulls off is seriously impressive, but man, poor Jim Neidhart. Almost exactly 1 year ago, Jim was competing in the Canadian Stampede 10-man tag at WWF In Your House. Now look at him, getting completely squashed by the NWO. Goldberg was supposed to come out next for a promo, but he wasn't in his locker room. Doug Dillinger went in and he and the boys found nothing but a trashed room with graffiti on the walls. Who could have done such a thing? There's no clues around at all. Raw begins with an Undertaker promo this week. On Nitro, Bret Hart cuts a promo. Undertaker says he and Austin may be tag team champions, but they'll never be partners unless Austin comes to the ring and apologizes to the dead man. Vince McMahon appears and Vince can't believe what he's hearing. McMahon says Taker tombstoning his brother means nothing. Vince would have done the exact same thing to prove he wasn't conspiring with his little brother too. Vince brings up the fact that one tombstone put Kane away last night, while at WrestleMania it took 3, a fair point indeed. And McMahon continues on by saying if anyone deserves an apology around here, it's Mr. McMahon. Undertaker put his hands on the chairman. Vince sustained a serious neck injury, so Undertaker can give Vince that apology while he thinks about tonight's main event on Raw. Taker and Austin versus the New Age Outlaws for the Tag Team Championship. The glass shatters, Austin makes his way to the ring, so that apology from the Undertaker's gonna have to wait. McMahon and company retreat back up the rampway when Austin gets in the ring, and Stone Cold says the Undertaker's right. They aren't friends, but they are champions. If McMahon wants to make Austin fight tonight, then he will defend his tag team title that's currently in the Undertaker's grubby little hand, but Stone Cold Steve Austin will not be giving the Undertaker an apology. Instead, Austin flips the dead man off before leaving the ring, so it appears there's still no respect being shown between the new tag team champions. JR and King let us know that we're going to see a triple threat match tonight for the IC title featuring Rock, X-Pac and Triple H. We'll also have the bikini contest trophy presentation. Wait, hold up. We need to look at that last promo a bit closer. Check it out. Steve Austin has a new WWF Championship belt. Now, rather than me talking about how the belt came to be and why a custom belt was even made, I thought I'd pass this part over to an expert in the field, one of the big dogs of belt collecting. So here's channel friend Hazard F5 to give you some backstory into the Smoking Skull belt.
The origin of the Smoking Skull belt really boils down to 2 separate occasions. The first one with Austin being champion in '98, rocking the Blue Big Eagle WWF Championship belt that debuted the night after WrestleMania 14, replacing the Winged Eagle after its 10-year run. Austin was in the ring with the belt over his shoulder, and when he went to kick someone to give them a stunner, the belt jumped up and dug into Austin's neck. And unfortunately for Austin, the top and bottom of the main plate are particularly sharp and could do some damage if not handled carefully. This, combined with the fact that he wasn't actually a big fan of the design itself, he ended up having a conversation with Road Warrior Hawk, who had mentioned that, as the face of the company, Austin having his own custom championship made all the sense in the world and could be a very cool idea. Especially considering that Austin was the anti-authority figure at the time, replacing a corporately created design with one that screams Stone Cold Steve Austin made perfect sense. So with that in mind, he contacted J-Mar, Joe Marshall, who created the Big Eagle belt, to have his own custom creation made. J-Mar handed off the designing of the belt to his colleague Matthew Bulk, who's designed some of the most well-known wrestling belts in history, including the hardcore-themed ECW belts, and is still very active within the wrestling belt community. As part of the design process, Austin had mentioned that he wanted the belt to be silver, or nickel in wrestling belt makers' terms, because he wanted the design to match up to his leather jacket that he wore to the ring each night, which was black leather with silver accent pieces. While that's what Austin requested, J-Mar felt that a gold belt would actually look better and pop more on television, so he made one of each, one gold one and one nickel one, and he brought both to TV to show Austin to have him choose which one he preferred, which is the image that you see here, which has been floating around for years. Austin reportedly preferred the gold one of the two that he saw, and that's the one that ended up on television. Now, allegedly, Vince McMahon had no knowledge that Austin had actually ordered his own custom championship, and depending on who you ask, allegedly, Vince McMahon first saw the championship when Austin walked out with it on an episode of Monday Night Raw. Now, I completely believe that Austin ordered the belt without Vince's knowledge, because sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. However, the control freak like Vince is, I find it very hard to believe that he didn't at least get eyes on the belt before it ended up on TV, because at the end of the day, Vince McMahon is an intelligent individual, and it was also the fact that we got the gold one on TV. Vince McMahon had not had a Silver World title on TV since 1986 with Hulk Hogan, and it was fairly common knowledge backstage that he just generally didn't like nickel-plated belts. So the gold one popping up on TV makes sense to me, with the Austin actually going to Vince and Vince having some input on which one was finally used. And like I said, Vince is no idiot. I bet he saw that Smoking Skull Championship and he didn't see smoking skulls, he didn't see rattlesnakes. The only thing that man saw was dollar signs. And that's the origin of the Smoking Skull Championship.
A big thanks to Hazard for coming onto the show and giving us that brief history of the Smoking Skull belt. Remember to check him out on YouTube and Instagram and tell him Wrestling Bio sent you. On Nitro, new US champion Bret Hart reminds us of what he said a few months back. Pro wrestling has become a long plastic hallway filled with pimps and thieves and a place where good men die like dogs. But that's all changed now that His Excellency is the new WCW United States champion. Chalk one up for the good guy. Diamond Dallas Page can take his sorry ass excuses, and DDP should remember one thing: you show up to fight or you don't show up at all. Bret promises to be a good champion, a man who will give title shots and become the greatest US champion of all time. And as for Bret's little run-in last week with the icon Sting, the Stinger doesn't need to apologise, all is forgiven. Bret then says he stays on the outer fringe of the NWO out of respect for Sting. The Hitman says he's not a full-blown member because he admires Sting, and Bret also recognises that WCW screwed Sting over the same way Bret got screwed over in WWF. Sting even has good taste when it comes to finishing moves, but last week when Bret ran down to the ring to interfere in the tag team title match, well, that was Sting's fault. For some reason, it was Sting's own behaviour that cost him the tag team championships, but Bret warned Sting not to listen to these fans week in and week out. The fans aren't Sting's friends. Bret Hart, on the other hand, is Sting's friend. D'Lo vs Vader on Raw's War, Jericho vs Malenko on WCW Nitro. D'Lo brings his European belt and his marvellous neck to the ring, but the belt isn't up for grabs in this match. His neck very much is in jeopardy though. He grabs a mic and he says the folks at Euro Disney informed him of two new rides at their theme parks, the Sky High and the Lowdown. Vader can come down to the ring and choose what one he wants. D'Lo takes a corner splash, but that chest protector ensures the European champion is safe and sound. Even a clothesline can't hurt D'Lo, and when Vader sits on the champ after a failed sunset flip attempt, D'Lo's completely fine. A corner splash from D'Lo hurts Vader though, as D'Lo clearly uses his protective gear as a weapon. Vader then gets choked out, and D'Lo impresses fans and himself by body slamming his opponent in the middle of the ring. The European champion then pulls off a moonsault, but he can't put Vader away for the 1, 2, 3. So the big man sends D'Lo to the outside, the chest protector gets removed, Vader performs a splash, and Vader wins the match via countout. Even in defeat, D'Lo was the star of the match, and as mentioned in the Fully Loaded video, the European champ has a lot of newfound confidence. On Nitro, Dean Malenko gets his final shot at Chris Jericho's Cruiserweight title. Stingo Malenko has to win this one because he won't get another chance as long as Jericho remains champion. Jericho attacks on the outside, Dean takes a few chops before getting sent into the guardrail. In the ring though, Malenko dropkicks Jericho during an aerial attack and the challenger lays the punches in following a failed pin attempt. A diving sunset flip gets countered with a lion tamer. Chris manages to lock it in, but Dean makes it to the ropes. Chris performs his springboard dropkick, and after Dean falls to the outside, Chris also pulls off a plancha, but the flow of the match gets broken up with a Nitro commercial break. We come back to Jericho still in control, but Dean fights back with his jumping leg lariat. Chris then takes a German suplex, but he won't let Malenko build any kind of momentum after performing an inverted suplex followed by a lion salt. It's odd, but also refreshing seeing Jericho being so dominant in a match against Dean Malenko. Dean performs a double underhook powerbomb before trying to end it with a cloverleaf, but Chris makes it to the bottom rope. Chris also stops an aerial attack, but he ends up climbing up to the top turnbuckle only to get DDT'd by the Iceman. This one made the crowd jump from their seats. The crowd pops when Dean covers Jericho, but Chris gets a hand on the ropes and the match continues on. Chris rolls to the outside, he pulls out those brass knucks that don't look like brass knucks, but we'll call them brass knucks anyway. Back in the ring, Dean accidentally pokes Mark Curtis in the eye, and this gives Chris a chance to use his 3D printed brass knucks, but Dean performs a back suplex and Malenko takes the weapon. Jericho gets whacked, Dean puts his hand in the air to celebrate, but Marky Mark sees the weapon and Dean gets himself disqualified. It was your last chance, Dean, and you blew it. Good TV match though, and the best match on Nitro this week. Mean Gene Doug Dillinger and security guy number 5, who thinks he's hard but he cries in his pillow every night, stand outside Goldberg's dressing room. The WCW champ's in there, he isn't happy that the NWO wrecked his room, but Okerlund still plans on interviewing Goldberg a little later on.
Hey homeboy, no Saturday Night Favors this week, but you can get a sweet Saturday Night Favor shirt and it make your bratwurst grow very big. Visit chinlocks.com today. Yeah baby.
Steve Williams versus Bart Gunn in a Brawl for All contest next on Raw. On Nitro, we've got Curt Hennig versus Steve McMichael. Before the Brawl for All fight, we get a Darren Drozdov Draws' World video where he shows off his snakes. He says he loves playing with his snakes. Draws also likes to play with firearms, and he says he keeps these for any big-haired Jersey girls who might show up at his door. A bit harsh, I thought. And Darren also shows off his ability to throw up on demand because this is clearly very impressive. If this is Draws' world, then it's a world I don't want to live in. It looks, I don't know, shit. This is the Brawl for All match that pretty much puts an end to the widely reported Dr. Death push in WWF. And hey, it sucks, but listening to Steve's boy Jim Ross go silent at the end of the match always makes me laugh. It's not funny, but it is funny. Also, there are others in this tournament who did fairly well for themselves after defeat, so just remember that too. I mean, the guy who takes the most spectacular knockout still went on to become a WWE champion. I gave the first round to Williams. He got in a takedown and he also landed the most punches. Bart took a pretty hard shot too in the last few seconds of the round, so things were looking good for Doc with 10 points on the card. In round 2, Dr. Death was a bit more wild with his punches and he ended up paying for it. This takedown right here leads to a torn hamstring, but he's going to finish the fight seeing as he's still leading on points. At least I had him leading anyway, thanks to most punches landed again in round 2. In round 3, we witnessed the first knockout of the Brawl for All and the first time the crowd popped during the whole tournament. A big left to the jaw sends Williams down to the mat and he's out cold. JR goes silent for a few seconds as Bart Gunn pulls off a big upset in the Brawl for All, and it's been very well documented that this victory would actually cost Bart dearly in terms of his position in WWF. Steve Williams was the golden boy of this tournament, the chosen one, but you simply can't have a chosen one if the matches aren't predetermined. A great victory for Bart Gunn though, and an entertaining shoot fight on Raw's War. On Nitro, we get one of the guys who's currently trying to bring back the Four Horsemen against the man responsible for breaking the group up. Mongo hasn't forgotten what Kurt did last year, and a few punches to the head followed by a hip toss leads to Hennig taking his weekly timeout on the outside. It's written in his contract. Kurt snaps Mongo's neck across the top rope and Steve takes a few kicks to the ribs. On the outside, Ravishing Rick Rude gets in a cheap shot, but Steve fires back by pulling off the same neck snap that Kurt pulled off seconds earlier. Mongo pulls off a power slam, but he gets distracted by Rude. Kurt pulls off the perfect plex, and Steve McMichael takes a loss on Monday Nitro. Short and not very sweet. Owen Hart issues an open challenge next on Raw. On Nitro, Hollywood Hogan cuts a promo. Owen comes to the ring and he says he proved last night at Fully Loaded that he's the most dangerous man in WWF and he's definitely not a nugget. If anyone wants to challenge Owen, they should come on down for a fight and the Blackheart will teach him a lesson in being a badass. Jason Sensation comes out wearing his Owen Hart outfit and Jason says it's time for Owen and himself to stand nose to nose, meaning they'll be miles apart. Jason starts a nugget chant. Owen goes up the ramp to take this joker out, but then Dan the Man Severn shows up just in time and Jason looks pretty happy. Severn wants to fight in his suit and Owen takes advantage by dragging Severn around by his sweet tie while laying the punches in. It takes no time at all for Owen to lock in a sharpshooter, but Severn counters it and the two men start throwing down in the middle of the ring. A concussed Ken Shamrock then appears from the audience and he attacks Owen. The bell rings as Shamrock applies a Dragon Sleeper, but then Dan Severn goes after Shamrock with a Dragon Sleeper of his own. A strange turn of events indeed, but maybe Severn was annoyed with Shamrock interfering in his business. Who knows? Steve motherfucking Blackman shows up to check Dan's form and he tells Severn that his hold was a little sloppy. With more practice, he might be a decent fighter one day. And Ken heads backstage where he takes out his frustrations on poor Michael Cole. Ken Shamrock has issues, man. I hope he sorts himself out. On Nitro, Hollywood Hogan congratulates Paige for taking one of the best ass kickings Hulk has ever seen in the wrestling business last week. Tonight though, it's all about Hulk versus DDP, and Hogan says, and I quote, "Hollywood saddled up because I'm ready to ride your butt through the throttle tonight." Hulk also says he's gonna ride Dallas real hard in the ring, not joking. And this episode of Nitro will feature DDP's final match because when you mess with the NWO, you mess with the NWO for life. That's it, that's all Hogan had to say. So tonight, DDP said Hogan will get banged and Hogan said he's going to ride Dallas real hard. I didn't know such things could get shown live on TNT if I'm honest. The whole bash at the Beach 98 main event then gets shown on Nitro. Hogan and Bischoff wanted Jay Leno to pay close attention to this match as it shows what happens to outsiders when they try to enter a wrestling ring. I understand why the company aired the match in terms of getting viewers to switch over, but there's also the fact that the match totally sucked, so swings and roundabouts I guess. Personally speaking, I'd rather watch a 20-minute Jerry Flynn versus Ernest Miller match, but I'm not the one producing these shows. Scorpio and Faarooq versus the DOA on Raw. On Nitro, Goldberg cuts a promo. Bradshaw joins the commentary desk because Bradshaw always has a ton of great things to say. Honestly, I'd prefer Yamaguchi-san calling the action. Bradshaw says he attacked Terry Funk last night because Terry had plenty of opportunities to tell him about his planned 6-month vacation, but Terry waited until right before their tag match at Fully Loaded, and Bradshaw found that disrespectful. 8-Ball pulls off a hip toss and Scorpio replies with a jumping back kick. Faarooq and Skull then come in and Faarooq performs a back elbow followed by a middle rope clothesline. It goes to the outside where the DOA double team Faarooq, and so Scorpio pulls off a top rope crossbody on the likers of all things Michael. But back in the ring, the DOA work together to keep Scorpio grounded. Bradshaw gets tired of Jerry Lawler's jokes. He says he's not here to listen to a comedy routine and Lawler better start calling this wrestling match. Yes, there is a sign in the audience too. Bradshaw then attacks 8-Ball on the outside, or maybe it was Skull, I don't know and I don't care. Scorpio feels the wrath of Big Bully Bradshaw too, and the match gets thrown out when the referee loses control and everyone fights in the ring. Sergeant Slaughter comes down and he tells Bradshaw to leave, and Raw moves on to its next match. On Nitro, the commentators and Mean Gene make a big deal out of this Goldberg promo, trying to put it across like this is the first time Goldberg's ever spoken on TV. Bill had already cut promos on WCW Worldwide earlier in the year. He doesn't have much to say here, to be honest, and his entrance takes longer than the promo, just like Goldberg's matches. Goldberg says he's been observing Hollywood Hogan and his cronies from the bottom right to the top. What they did to Goldberg's dressing room crosses a line, and the NWO made this personal. Serious? A bit of graffiti on the wall makes things personal? Well, alright then. Goldberg says he's destroyed everyone placed in front of him, and the destruction isn't going to stop. Tonight, Bryan Adams is next. We've got the Triple Threat IC title match next on Raw, while on Nitro, Arn Anderson addresses rumours about the Four Horsemen reuniting in WCW. Rock says the whole world watched them lay the smackdown on Triple H last night for 30 minutes, and now the Great One has to face both X-Pac and Triple H in a Triple Threat match. That's fine with Rocky though. The IC champ will make Hunter and Kid famous if you smell what the Rock's cooking. Triple H, meanwhile, announces it's his birthday in the ring before telling fans to suck it, so happy birthday Triple H. Enjoy this ass whooping courtesy of the People's Champ. The bout starts off as a 2-on-1 match, and you know where this is going. Eventually, Pac and Triple H are going to attack each other, but early on they function as a team. Hunter suplexes Rock while X-Pac performs a leg drop. DX celebrated a little before Rocky takes a few chops in the corner. The champ does get a chance to clothesline X-Pac, but Hunter puts Rock down with a clothesline of his own. So Kid stays on the mat for a moment while Hunter performs the Harley Race knee. Triple H hits the pedigree, X-Pac breaks up the cover, and Pac tries pinning Rock, but he doesn't get very far. The DX guys push each other around, but before there's any real physicality, The Rock wakes up and Triple H gets taken out. X-Pac then performs a beautiful spinning heel kick, but he ends up knocking Hunter off the apron accidentally. Rock's able to hit Kid with a Samoan drop, and look at this. Look at the fans now standing up when Rock goes for the people's elbow. Rock delivers the most electrifying move in sports entertainment today, and the crowd pop again for the Rock bottom. But Triple H interrupts the cover. Rock takes the facebreaker knee smash and a big clothesline from DX's leader, and when Rock puts Hunter on the mat, he ends up taking an X Factor from Kid. Hunter once again breaks X-Pac's cover, the DX boys argue again, and it's Triple H who ends up striking his own teammate. While X-Pac and Triple H fight, The Rock grabs his belt and he leaves the ring. The referee ends up counting Rock out, so The Rock loses the match, but he retains the IC Championship. So tell me this then, who won the match? Countouts in triple threat matches are stupid, but I'm not really mad about the match either. Hunter and Rock had an excellent showdown at Fully Loaded, so they get a pass here on Raw. On Nitro, AA Arn Anderson gets interviewed by Mean Gene Okerlund. It's like we're back to Nitro in 1995 and 1996. Mean Gene says Arn went a bit hard on Malenko and Mongo 2 weeks ago on Thunder. Remember, the lads wanted to get the Horsemen back and Anderson said he wasn't prepared to do it. Arn says many people have said to him over the years that they'd do anything to be a Horseman, but people need to realise that Anderson gave everything for the honour. Tonight, Anderson wanted to assess things. He wanted to see how Dean and Mongo performed. But Dean lost his match because he lost his cool, and as for McMichael, well, Curt Hennig may be a better wrestler, but Steve should have been motivated seeing as Curt was responsible for the downward spiral of the Four Horsemen. McMichael should have heard the sound of the cage door slamming on Flair's head like Anderson hears every night in his sleep, and maybe he could have got the job done. Anderson's being asked to hook his horse to a cart that only has 2 wheels and a broken wheel, in regards to Chris Benoit. The enforcer asked the guys to let it be, and now he's telling the guys to let it be. Double trouble on Raw, Brakus vs Jesús and Val Venus vs Brian Christopher. On Nitro, Scott Hall takes on Sting. Last night, the New Age Outlaws challenged Kane and Mankind to a title match tonight on Raw, but seeing as we have new champions, Road Dogg says the names have changed but the mission remains the same. The Outlaws will win the tag team titles in the main event tonight on Raw. Brakus vs Jesús is a 1-minute marathon match, high drama, high impact, an absolute barn burner that puts those Ric Flair NWA Broadways to shame. Jesús gets shoved, power slammed, he takes a few elbow drops and Brakus wins with a spine buster. His Brawl for All loss was still a bit too fresh, I think. Keeping this guy off TV for another month or two could have helped, but say goodbye to Brakus anyway because this is his final match in WWF. He messed up his knee and shoulder in that Savio Vega Brawl for All match, so he went on to become a personal trainer. Yeah, I wonder if he gave honest advice about how to get a body like that. All natural, folks. All natural. Mrs. Yamaguchi's seen getting out of Val Venus's shower, so it looks like these two crazy kids are still up to no good. Yamaguchi-san comes out to watch this Venus vs. Christopher match, and he's brought along Kai and Tai, two big sausages smaller than Alex's big bratwurst, and a samurai sword. If you know, you know. Kai and Tai enjoy seeing Val Venus get dropkicked by Too Sexy, and Christopher seems to enjoy it too. Teo shakes his salami as Val fights back with an atomic drop followed by an inverted atomic drop. Christopher goes for a powerbomb, but it gets countered with a big old Alabama slam, and a distraction from Scott Taylor pays off for Christopher in the short term, but Val comes back and too much gets taken out. Venus wins the match after a fisherman suplex. Taka Michinoku runs down to help Val when Too Much launch a post-match attack, but that's not what everyone remembers here. Mr. Yamaguchi says Kai and Tai are challenging Val Venus to a match next week, and after Val gets beat, he's gonna get a big surprise courtesy of Yamaguchi-san. Yamaguchi then puts his sword to good use by chopping some meat, and he then says one of the most famous lines of the Attitude Era.
Jumpy, beep, beep.
It's ridiculous. I like how Val sees this as a real threat. He's like, oh my god, this is now getting super serious. So next week, Val's going to team up with Taka to take on Kai and Tai, and hopefully he wins, because if he fails to beat Kai and Tai, then his days of beating himself are long gone. It's all Sting at the beginning of the WCW match. The Icon didn't take too kindly to getting a toothpick thrown in his face. He ends up falling victim to a classic cheap shot though, and the bad guy's able to hit Sting with his signature fall-away slam. Hall begins toying with Sting by laying the boots in. He gets too confident though, and he ends up getting sent into the corner for 2 Stinger splashes. No, make that 3. Scott then takes a Scorpion Death Drop, and this one should be all over. But then the Hitman Bret Hart shows up just as Sting was going to apply the Scorpion Deathlock. Bret says he just wants to talk to his friend, but Sting's not having it. The Hitman gets the jam knocked out of him, and this leads to Kurt Hennig and Vincent showing up to attack the Stinger. Keep in mind that Bret doesn't fight at all here. The Wolfpack come down and Bret sits in the corner while Nash powerbombs Vincent. The commentators say this is all Bret's fault really, but Bret's refusing to get involved. Scott Hall hits Kevin Nash with a low blow, and when Bret goes to help Sting, he too gets his balls knocked together. Sting tries to put Bret in a deathlock, but Bret gets out of harm's way and he leaves the ringside area. Bret didn't attack anyone, so Sting better get his act together and realize who his real friends are. It's certainly not that Lex Luger guy, that's for sure. LOD 2000 versus Mark Henry and The Godfather, Steiner and Bagwell promo over on Nitro. The LOD cut a promo before the match, and it looks like Hawk had one too many. That's exactly what WWF were going for in this one, and this whole storyline got quite a lot of criticism when it aired on TV. WCW would end up doing a similar storyline too around the wrestler having issues with alcohol, and it's not funny nor entertaining, is it? We've had fun laughing at how awful the LOD was during this run, but this goes beyond that. Still, the idea is to cover everything from the Monday Night War in this series, so here goes. On a lighter note, The Godfather comes to the ring with his Creatures of the Night for the very first time. All natural Creatures of the Night, may I add. But the fun stops when Hawk trips when getting into the ring. Mike Chioda isn't sure if Hawk can work tonight, but he gets in his corner. As Jim Ross says, the Road Warrior doesn't look to be himself. Animal takes some damage from Kama, but he gets a chance to tag out. He extends his hand, but it looks like Hawk is nodded off, or at least he's just not paying attention to the match. Jim Ross apologizes to fans watching at home, making this feel a bit more real. Ross explains that Hawk got some bad personal news earlier on, but we learn nothing about this news as Animal tries and fails to tag his partner in again. Animal fights off both guys by himself, and Hawk falls off the top rope. The Road Warriors lose another match after Animal takes a Death Valley driver from Kama, and it's all because Hawk was wasted. On Nitro, Scott Steiner lets go of Buff's wheelchair and Bagwell takes a tumble. Steiner realizes what happened and he begs for someone to help him out, but of course there's nothing wrong with Buff Daddy. What a guy. Bagwell tells the cameraman to look at the scar on his neck. It's from surgery, a C3 and C4 fusion. Buff wants everyone to know that his injury was very real, but Bagwell's back and ready to get revenge on Rick Steiner. Scott says Rick's just mad that Bagwell fooled him, and Scotty wants to know how Buff kept a straight face when Hogan pushed him off the wheelchair. Buff says it was the hardest thing he's ever had to do in his life. When Rick helped Bagwell off the floor, Scotty knew the hook was in, and the hug Rick gave Bagwell was the perfect setup. The one thing Rick has that Scott hasn't got is compassion. Scott beat Rick in the backyard, in high school, and college. Scott's beaten Rick up plenty of times, and if Rick wants another beating at Road Wild, then Scott will happily oblige. James J. Bebe Dillon appears and he rips in the Bagwell for the stunt he pulled last week on Nitro. He also tells Scott Steiner that he's going to do everything he can to make sure the Battle of the Steiners takes place in Sturgis, and the NWO guys are happy to hear it. Looks like Scott and Buff are eager to see Rick at the pay-per-view. We've got Goldberg versus Bryan Adams next on Nitro. On Raw, we've got the Bikini Contest winner presentation. We can get these parts over fairly quickly. On Raw, Lawler's about to announce Sable is the winner of the Fully Loaded Bikini Contest, but he gets handed a note saying Jackie won at the pay-per-view. Mr. McMahon says Sable got herself disqualified by using body paint. So Jackie claims her trophy and she leaves the ring along with Marvelous Mark Mero. Sable says she doesn't need a trophy. The fans know who the real winner is. Sable's just annoyed that Mr. McMahon wasn't man enough to tell her to her face. McMahon comes out annoyed that Sable's questioning his masculinity, and McMahon says Sable should be thankful that he rehired her. Vince is Sable's knight in shining armor. She was done for, but McMahon brought her back due to her popularity. McMahon says women like Sable are a dime a dozen. She could get replaced by, quote, any bimbo or airhead. Sable owes McMahon, but Vince is feeling generous. So Sable can stay employed in WWF on one condition: she's not allowed to be an ungrateful bitch. Vince's words, not mine. Sable flips McMahon off behind his back, she takes her shirt off to reveal a bikini, and McMahon just walks away. To be honest, I thought WWF were just going to forget about the whole McMahon rehiring Sable thing, so at least they tied up that loose end. Still though, you gotta admit it's a kinda awkward promo knowing what we now know about old dirty dog Vince McMahon. On Nitro, Bryan Adams did get in more offense than Curt Hennig 2 weeks ago, but it was still nowhere near enough to beat Goldberg. Adams performed a neck snap over the top rope, a diving shoulder tackle, and a suplex, but that's all he could manage against the world champion. Goldberg performs his snap swinging neckbreaker, or the chainsaw. Adams gets speared. Vincent comes in too, and he gets speared. Goldberg wasn't happy with how Adams bumped, so Bryan takes another spear before getting jackhammered. The commentators announced that this is 121-0 for Goldberg. So, on Thunder last week, Goldberg defeated the Giant in a dark match. He then had 3 house show matches against Curt Hennig from the 17th of July to the 19th of July. On Nitro last week, he beat the Giant in another dark match. He then defeated Jerry Flynn on WCW Worldwide in a match that aired on the 25th. Another house show encounter with Curt Hennig happened on the 26th, and then he defeated Bryan Adams here on Nitro. By my count, that makes Goldberg 122-0. Raw ends with Undertaker and Austin versus the New Age Outlaws. On Nitro, DDP takes on Hollywood Hogan.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Shut up.
Undertaker and Austin have a brief stare down before the tag match begins. A fan throws a beach ball in the ring and Austin kicks it out before he and Billy Gunn lock up. Austin goes down after a shoulder block, Billy flexes while Stone Cold's on the mat, so Austin gets up and he does a little flexing of his own. Perfect. An inverted atomic drop gets followed up with a hard clothesline. Gunn then gets catapulted and Austin goes for a stunner, but Billy gets out of the ring and Stone Cold follows. Road Dogg gets in a cheap shot, Undertaker stands by and watches as Stone Cold gets dropped across the guardrail, but Taker plays ball when the match gets back in the ring. We get Road Dogg and the Undertaker doing a bit of work and it's all Undertaker. Road Dogg gets hit with old school, the dead man goes for a chokeslam, but some bad timing from Austin allows Billy Gunn to come in and break up the move. The Outlaws target Undertaker's left leg and Road Dogg gets way too confident. He delivers a few corner punches, but he ends up getting thrown into the corner where Taker lays in a few body shots. A missed big boot though allows Billy Gunn to tag in and we're back to the challengers working over Taker's leg. Stone Cold runs in to break a leg lock, but there's nothing he can do when the Outlaws utilise the ring post to their advantage. Road Dogg misses a leapfrog body guillotine though, and Billy Gunn misses a stinger splash, giving us a brilliant flare flop afterwards that the Nature Boy would have been proud of. And here comes on Stone Cold cleaning house after getting a hot tag. Austin dominates the Outlaws with right hands, a Luthez press to Billy Gunn and a Stone Cold Stunner to Road Dogg. Austin pins the real Double J and the tag champs retain in the Raw main event. Billy Gunn gets chokeslammed after the match. Stone Cold grabs a few beers and he heads back up the ramp. He then decides he's going to give his partner a Steve Weiser and Undertaker accepts the gesture. The Undertaker necks the beer and the crowd pops, but then Kane and Mankind appear and they attack Austin while the Undertaker's back was turned. Another possible setup by the Undertaker? Who knows? When Raw went off the air though, Austin hit Kane with a Stone Cold Stunner and the Undertaker looked on from the rampway. On Nitro, DDP enters the ring from the audience and Hollywood goes on offense right away. Dallas gets choked with Hollywood's wrist tape, but Dallas comes back and Hogan gets punched, kicked and choked in the corner. Hulk comes back with an eye poke and a back scratch, classic heel Hogan. He then performs a back suplex and he brings some chin abuse to Dallas's front door. DDP then takes a clothesline and a body slam, but he dodges an elbow drop and he fires up on Hogan with a few punches and a discus clothesline. DDP then tries to clothesline Hogan over the top rope and Hogan says, "Not today, brother." Instead, he rolls out of the ring where the Booty Man tries to help out, but Page is having none of it. Back in the ring, Hogan begs for mercy and Dallas ends up taking a clothesline in the corner. We then see the big boot, and when Hulk goes for another body slam, DDP pulls off a diamond cutter. The black and white NWO hit the ring to give us a DQ finish. We have never seen this before on Nitro, have we? The Wolfpack then come out and DDP fights alongside the red and black. Bill Goldberg then shows up and he takes out NWO Hollywood. It looks like Big Sexy wants no piece of the world champ, but someone who isn't afraid to go after Billy Boy is the Giant. Nitro fades out as Goldberg takes a chokeslam. Replaying the Bash at the Beach 1998 main event hurt this episode of Nitro, in my opinion. It would have been great for folks who didn't buy the pay-per-view, but those who did buy it just to see Malone and Rodman may have felt a little ripped off. Believe me too, many people did buy Bash at the Beach just to see the NBA stars in a wrestling ring. It's pretty easy to give Raw the point this week, so our scores are now 69 points to Raw, nice, 59 points to Nitro, and we've got 16 ties. In the television ratings, Raw won with a 4.9, Nitro stayed at a 4.7. We still haven't peaked in terms of viewership, but the state of pro wrestling, in terms of popularity, was extremely good and extremely healthy. Next week on Raw, Undertaker and Austin team up once again as they continue their journey on the SummerSlam highway to hell. Triple H takes on X-Pac in a one-on-one match, and we're going to find out what happens to Val Venus's PP. It should be a good one. On Nitro, Scott Steiner calls out Brother Rick, the NWO target DDP's wife Kimberly, and Bret Hart tries to show Sting he's a friend by teaming up with the Icon in the main event. I'll see you all next week, hopefully. Please remember to subscribe to the Reliving the War Highlights channel. You'd be doing me a massive favour. Thank you very much for watching this week's episode, and please take care.